discipline. Not so much what to do, but also what not to do. I learned what not to do when God gives you a ministry. I learned how to handle God's people. I learned how to stay. Hi, I'm Pastor Cynthia Diggs, and this is my story. So my life starts like this. It began in Las Vegas, Nevada. My father had a mandate to preach the word of God. Unfortunately, he did not want to do it. He thought singing in a quartet would be his future. However, God had another plan. I am the child that was born from my father's yes. You see, my family lost everything they had because Daddy wanted to sing in a quartet group. He sure did. But God said, no, I want you to preach my word. I was told from my parents that the day my father surrendered changed the whole life of our family. I was that child when Daddy said yes to the Lord. Mama conceived me and my life began. It was at that time that I was given the life of ministry as a child, and I had no clue what I was in for. After a few years, my family moved to Texas, where I made it my home. It was at that time where I began to work in the church with my parents, and I saw all kinds of things done in the name of ministry. My father was the pastor, Mama was the first lady, and I saw it all. We sang in the choir, we were drugged to church every Sunday. But listen, I told my parents, when I get out from under your house, that's the one thing that I'm not gonna do, and that's ministry. However, once again, God had another plan. It was about in the year of 1990 that I was given a straight word from the Lord to preach his word. Had it in a dream, saw it very clearly, but I really didn't understand that this was the role that God would want me to play. Remember, I said I didn't want to do this, but how do you know? God knows, and you cannot compete with God. And so at that time, I questioned God and said, me? And sure enough, he said yes. I didn't tell anyone at the time because I was really frazzled, I was afraid, and I really felt inadequate because there's so many components to doing ministry. However, God is not looking for those that are the ones that have it quote unquote all together. He's looking for availability more than ability. At that time, I accepted my call, but I didn't tell anybody. I was going to a church in Fort Worth because after Daddy passed and went on to glory, it was at that time we joined a church in Fort Worth, Texas. I worked in ministry, I served, I taught a girls' department Bible study. I did everything that I was let do under the name of the church. However, when it came to preaching the word of God, I was denied that. Why? Because of my gender. Women don't preach, I was told. Well, at that time, I didn't really have a mentor. I didn't really know what that was. I didn't have anyone to guide me. I was told, you cannot do this. I was told dreams that I had where I saw myself standing in front of people with a Bible in my hand, giving the word of God. I asked the pastor, what does this mean? I was told, women don't preach. Once again, I felt rejected. I felt like an orphan, actually. I was just out here because after a while, I left that church. I went on a fast. God told me, you've been released. Released where, I asked. Where do I go? What do you do when you don't know what to do? When you know God is calling you to something, but you can't get there. Why can't you get there? Because no one will help you get there. I wandered for 6 months. No church home, no covering, no pastor, no first lady. I wandered from this church to that church, trying to find my home. It was at that time that I was offered to come and visit the church Unleashed, now that we call the St. John Church in Grand Prairie, Texas, Pastor Denny D. Davis. I joined that church in 2000. It was at that time that I was afforded the opportunity to come into the minister in training class. I had shared my calling with my pastor, but for 5 years, I sat in a classroom where I was taking notes, where I was learning about ministry. I was learning about myself. I was learning about the God that called me, because remember, women don't preach. And so I sat and I waited. What people don't know is when God calls you, you don't automatically run to a pulpit. You need to run to a place where you can learn, where your gift can be cultivated, where you can learn discipline. Here at the St. John Church, I learned discipline. Not so much what to do, but also what not to do. I learned what not to do when God gives you a ministry. I learned how to handle God's people. I learned how to study to show myself approved. I learned how to grab content out of a word and not just show up in the pulpit just because it was a cute place or a place where people perform. I learned how to discern the voice of God. So for 18 years I served. I served in the music ministry. I sang in the choir. I sang on the worship team, prayed on the intercessory team, worked with the youth, taught the women's growth group class, worked under the First Lady, taught the Victorious Disciples classes, because that's where preaching starts. Not in the pulpit, but it's how well you can serve. This is my story that came from the seed of my father that just wanted to sing in a quartet group. He thought that was the only way, but you can't sing out preaching. You have to do it the way God says. Oh, let me remind you, I also lost my only child on this journey. I was going through with the woman that was my mentor who told me, shame on you. You got pregnant and you're not married? You can never do ministry. And so I felt condemned. I felt like God wasn't really calling me. But yet God used that instant to show me that the grace he put on my life, I would have to extend it to other women. I didn't want to work with women after that because I felt if I'm so bad and you're so good, I can't measure up to you. I can't compare to you, because she was the epitome of a woman in ministry. But God said, if you would just do it like I told you to do it. What is that, I asked. I said, what is real ministry? Are there any real people left? He said, when you do it, there will be at least one. And I read Isaiah 6. Who will we send? Who will go for us? And I answered, here am I. Send me. I'll go. From that moment, my life has not been the same. I was licensed in 2008. At that time, a rare illness had hit my body. I couldn't walk for 6 months. God was pushing me to an area of depending on Him. I asked for a closer walk, not the inability to walk. But sometimes God will have us go through a journey, people of God, where you will have to understand that it's not lights, camera, and action, but the call comes with pain. The call comes with a purpose. And if you haven't been broken, God can't use you to bring people into wholeness. So it was my brokenness. It was 2 spinal infusions later. The doctor gave me a 50-50 chance of walking. It was my mom, who is now resting in the arms of Jesus, who took care of me. God had delivered her from cancer in her breast. She cared for me, nurtured me. My sister cooked for me. My brother and sister-in-law, they laid hands on me and brought me back to the place I needed to be. The church prayed for me. And here I am today. I took God at His word. And 50 plus 50 equals 100. And I can walk today. I know God as a healer. I know God as a deliverer. I know God to be God. And that's what He birthed in Cynthia Diggs. 2008 is when it got started in my life. God healed me. And from that moment on, He thrust me to places I never thought I would be. I was ordained in 2013 by my spiritual father, Dr. Denny Davis. Since that day, I have preached in 9 countries. Not because I'm so great, but because God said, you're gonna do it. My parents told me, it was prophesied over my life. We cannot compete with God. 9 countries, so many cities and states that I can't even name. God has been so good to me. From this ministry, Women in Ministry was birthed. Why am I so passionate about the women in ministry? Because I know my story. I know what I went through. I know how I was denied. I know how I tried everything else. I know how I was lied on, but I know how I depended on God. And I saw women in ministry doing things that were not biblical. They were not right. And I was compelled to bring them to a place where they could do it, where God would get the glory. Because it's all about God getting the glory. And if God doesn't get the glory, what's the use of me telling my story? And so Women in Ministry was birthed in 2012. Quarterly workshops where I was teaching women what I saw. You need to learn how to dress. Dress like a woman of God. Put on your full attire. The Bible says your full armor. That means you gotta be dressed all the way up. I'm not talking the pretty hat and the nice St. John and the nice J. Renee shoes. I'm talking show up right in your heart. And if your heart is right, you'll wear the right clothes. You know when you out of order. I said, but they're not dressing right. They're not showing up right. They have the wrong spirit. God said, so Women in Ministry will be your baby and you'll teach them. He said, don't talk about the problem, come forth with a solution. And so I thank God for giving me the Women in Ministry, the Women Preachers class. Once a year, I do a Women in Ministry workshop. I do a Women in Ministry conference. I do 12 workshops already where I teach how do you dress, how do we worship, how to understand your season, how to be a woman of God, how to govern yourself in the pulpit. What is an assignment versus an engagement? Oh, y'all don't want to hear about that because we think it's okay to accept everything that's thrown our way. But no, everything is not for us. These are the things I had to learn as a woman in ministry. I've been rejected. I've been talked about. I've been laughed at. But look at me now. God's plan is perfect. I'm at a place in my life that I know I couldn't be here had it not been for the Lord on my side. I'm glad I was raised in a Christian home. I'm glad my parents raised me in the admonition of God, because had it not been that way, I wouldn't be where I am today. Today I serve as the executive pastor of the Altar Exchange Church in Lancaster, Texas, under the leadership of Prophet Pastor Pernell Jordan. It is at this place where we're teaching how to get back to biblical principles, how to understand the altar, how to understand that change is inevitable if you're going to be a child of God. And so I'm passionate about what I do. I have compassion, but I'm very passionate. Ministry is not a joke. It's not a fly-by-night gig. A lot of people use it as just something to do. It's not a hobby. It's a mandate from God. I'm honored to be chosen. I'm honored to be used. I'm thankful that God put his hand on my life. And so here I am today, compelling men, women, boys and girls all over the world to come to Jesus. He's the only way, because without him, I'm nothing. Ministry is my life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't just want to be a woman that says she's in ministry, but I want to walk the walk and talk the talk. Because many people can talk about it, but they can't walk it. And so I'm grateful for my upbringing. I have mentors in my life. My life has been cultivated by my spiritual mentor, Pastor Sonia Dickerson, for 12 years, who has been intricate in my life, and Bishop Kevin Keith Dickerson. They have been great mentors to me. So I'm thankful for those that have poured into me, but it just got started. Just last week, I lost my dear sweet mother, who was my best cheerleader. She was there with me all the time. She taught me how to be a woman in ministry. But guess what? Her life is gone. It's ended on this side, but mine must continue. I will continue to be a woman in ministry because that's who I was born to be. I am proud to be Cynthia Diggs, the daughter of the late Pastor James Diggs and Lady Odessa Diggs. Why? Because ministry is who I am. That's all I know, and I'm glad to be a child of God.